Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Little Atypical. My name is Elijah, you can call me Lay, and I'm so sorry for the delays of content. Honestly, I had episode 31 and episode 32 recorded, but I never had a chance to edit it. As you can tell from both of those contents, I was kind of talking about, honestly, I didn't even finish editing it. As we're speaking, I'm still in the process of editing episode 31, but if everything goes right this week, I should have that up the first Monday of September. So if scheduling goes right, 31 will be up on Labor Day and 32 would be the week after, and then you'll be hearing this. So this is going to be kind of a less planned episode since it's been such a long time, and it's kind of like an update. I'll come up with a title. I don't even know what I'm calling this yet, but I know that what I wanted to talk about is personal development while you're not focusing on yourself. And the reason why I wanted to do a casual episode about this, like less structured, is because these past months, like I said, it has been me not focusing on myself as much as I was when I started to revise the podcast. So switching from, I guess, a selfish, quote unquote, selfish era to a less selfish era where the focus was kind of connecting with people, being helpful because that just needed to happen. And I wanted to talk about that because this might be a hot take, but I feel like content surrounding personal development, personal growth, and everything like that is geared towards focus on yourself, which, don't get me wrong, as someone who recovered as a people pleaser and everything, I think that type of content is necessary. But I also think we should talk about how to recognize personal development when you can't just focus on yourself. Because in reality, unless your circumstances allow it, a lot of times, no matter what area in life or what your goals are, it's still having to deal with people in one way or another, where it's not just you is the nicest way to say it. Like, for example, even if your goal is something to do with your career, right? Knowing people in that industry is part of your development, connecting with the right people, finding a mentor, and stuff like that is all a part of it. If your goal is to find a place to fit in, especially like after college and everything, after college, people typically struggle because they go from an environment where you had a community. Even if I was a commuter, but I know in terms of like if you were in the dorms, that's like the first time you're living with people around your own age. You're going through similar struggles even if you're not in the same major. So in a sense, you had a community. That's why many people struggle post-grad, because they feel isolated going from being around people their age and learning and having the same struggle of transitioning into adulthood. And then once you graduate, and then if you're lucky to start your big girl job, big boy job, whatever type job, you're working with people with a variety of ages. You're working to figure out how to progress in your field. Or even if you're like me and postgraduates has been less than ideal in terms of finding a role you want, especially within what you went to school for. It's gonna take having a community, having hobbies, having other places besides work. Because yes, you can make work friends. I do have certain takes on this. I think it's good to have companions at work, but there were times, especially when I was younger and working, that my coworker did kind of screw me over. In terms of workplaces, I'm not as pro workplace friends, but I know people have different opinions on that, because at the end of the day, we spend a good chunk of our life at work. Having someone there to make you like your job and having people there, I guess, changes the experience. I'm also the type to kind of be skeptical of workplace friends, but I digress on that one. Overall, the point is, I think when we talk about personal development, that it's so focused on like, oh, just focus on yourself, when we are in a society it's hard to just focus on yourself. And this is coming from someone who is an introvert. And my personal development is a lot different than someone who's a lot more extroverted, who needs to learn how to be comfortable with solitude. My personal development is surrounded by how do I want to be around people and not to feel constantly drained by people. My goal in, I guess, quarter two is the best way to describe it. So my plans that happened from March to, I would say, May has been focused on finding a place to go to, still volunteering and not being so within myself, because then I was becoming hyper vigilant on myself and my goals. And then on top of that, making it a point to help out my mom because she was going through her own thing, which was surgery. And she even said it was one of the harder things she went through. And sometimes, especially with people you care about, there are times where you need to be a little more involved in supporting them, because that's what you do for people you love. And I do think supporting someone is a lot different than people pleasing, because with people pleasing, it's more like the reasoning for it is never as pure. You know, it's like when you people please, it's kind of like you wanting to be seen as a good person. I also think with people pleasing, you have things like you can say you did, but it's never like an authentic reason behind it, you know? It's either like so they stay, it's so that you can say like, oh, I always do everything for you, but the reasoning behind why you do things are just not as pure. But supporting someone is always out of like care for them and love for them. Moving on from this incredibly long intro, because since I didn't take notes, I'm probably repeating myself. If I am, that this is repetitive, I'm so sorry. I haven't had enough time to really like clear out my thoughts, and honestly, this is kind of my way of doing that, because there was so much ways I was thinking I can go about this and things that I wanted to talk about. Because I came to the revelation that my personal development in that era versus what I was just going through was so different. I wanted to kind of highlight what the differences were. To start off, in, I guess, my inward era, I guess this is a better way to describe it. When I was being more inward, meaning focusing on myself, my experience was I was heavily focused on movement. Because of my focus, I was moving more. I was, I guess, thinking about like my eating habits a lot more. I just was thinking about everything, and I feel like during that time the focus was more on the details of everything. But at the same time, I processed emotions a lot differently. Like, not actually processing them, if I'm being quite honest. Because the thing is, like, anytime things would come up and something would upset me, for example, there were times when I was upset about a person, and I would be like, yeah, I'm not being productive enough, or I would just logically try to process how I was feeling about them, feeling about a situation, and I wouldn't be feeling my feelings. Like, it would be just me being like, okay, yes, it's obvious I felt this way about it, but there's only so much I control, so I'll think about this instead, I'll do this instead. And I do think a big part of that is because I'm a Capricorn moon. So it's not that Capricorn moons are cold, because common misconception, since the moon is in detriment when it's in the sign of Capricorn. But something I have noticed when it comes to processing emotions is that Capricorn moons ultimately uses logic and tries to intellectualize their emotions, like use their brains for something that the heart should be in control of. Like, we always try to turn it into something else, or if something is too hard for us, we kind of think about it of not wanting to deal with it, but instead wanting to like work on what can make us feel better about ourselves and work on ourselves. I think that's interesting because that's like how I do things. Like if I'm upset about something, I start feeling like it's a waste of time for me to continuously be upset. Instead, I need to be the richest, hottest, most up there version of myself, the highest version of myself, and I will work towards that and put my energy towards that. And I would say it's illogical to still be sad about something. You know, like I would kind of downplay whatever I was feeling. But when I'm being of service, it revealed a lot of blind spots. So I felt like during my time of being of service, whether it was like volunteering at where I volunteer or like just helping out my mom because she was going through something, it revealed a lot of blind spots. It brought up a lot of emotions and fears and doubts. Whereas like when I'm being more inward or having personal development during a time when I'm just focused on myself, I feel like instead of fears and doubts, it's more like insecurities, because there's a difference between those things. So like I would be thinking about like my physical features or where I'm at in life. And yes, fears and insecurities do tend to intertwine, but I do think there's a distinct difference. My insecurities are just things that I just happen to not like, but fear usually has something attached to it. I was insecure about not having a job. It was frustrating to me, but that was just the end point of it. I wasn't thinking about, like, for example, when the fear came up, I felt fear that I was falling behind, that if God forbid something happened to my mom, then I would be alone, because then I don't have family that I can really count on or fall back on, and I haven't reached a part of my life where I can fully be independent without a job, a high-paying job, or a job that can support me enough as an individual. And then it's not like I'm one of those people who had a relationship that worked out and is now considering like the move-in phase or thinking about when to get engaged phase or whatever. And that's another part of it, because while I was being of service, a lot of things happened, and even though I was kind of like irritated about those things for months, it didn't really hit me until I was being of service. Because when I was being of service, it's like I couldn't run from those things, because that's what I had space to do in comparison. Because when it's all about you and you have time for it to be all about you, I can ignore my feelings. I can ultimately change how I process feelings. But when it comes to being of service, there's no room to really intellectualize the emotions, because my time is already tied to what it's tied to. But when you are focusing on yourself, I feel like all the time is dedicated to you. So then you know how you work. You know how you can deal with it in a way that isn't necessarily dealing with it, that is technically repressing your emotions, but you're still contributing it to yourself, but in a different way, but in a way that you feel like you're in control. So as someone who kind of has a tendency to be a little bit controlling in terms of what I want out of life, that is also how I process emotions when I do have time for myself. I would look at myself like, okay, I'm insecure about this, but we can fix that by doing X, Y, and Z, because that will contribute to my social well-being. It will contribute to building a network. It will contribute to me liking my body more. So when I walk into rooms that I know I feel like I'm meant to be in, that I won't feel so in my head about myself, because I know what's true about me and I know what's not true about me. Like, that's the type of energy. Being of service, you kind of do what you can to take care of yourself, and a lot of those times it's just feeling, like allowing yourself to feel. And I wanted to talk about this because of how much in personal development where we only talk about the one area. And this is just your reminder that development will be different in different cycles. During that cycle of being of service, I cried so much. I was feeling so much, and I hated it, but I also knew it had to be done because it would have poured out either way, And what I'm working on now is kind of bringing both the styles of personal development together and kind of working on creating a toolkit for when I could be focused on myself and for when I am not as focused as myself. And I think everyone should develop different ways to care for themselves, to develop themselves in different phases, because it's not always going to be the same, and you shouldn't look at one way as falling off and the other way of being right, because when it comes to development, there are so many things that it's not linear, but that doesn't mean that when it's off, quote unquote, like when you're in a different cycle, that it's wrong to be in a different cycle. Because now I'm like in a phase where I'm doing kind of both, whereas I still have responsibilities of being of service, but how I'm trying to take care of myself is trying to build up different skills, like adulthood skills, because one thing about being of service did let me see is, like, even if I'm good at being myself individually, like choosing meals for myself and like how I eat healthier and little things like that, it's hard for me to take care of other people at the same capacity and take care of myself. I do still have dreams of being a parent someday. And even if not that, I do think I'm going to be the sibling helps out the parent as they get older. Because one reality is that your parents are getting older, and especially when you had an older parent, and having one parent really causes that fear a lot more, where you only feel like you have them. You're worried about once they go, but in reality, everyone goes. And if you grew up not having two parents, it feels harsher. When you grow up with just one parent, I just feel like it can go either way, where you either resent that parent for being a single parent, or you appreciate them and you feel like you want to have as much time with them as possible. So I know this episode is kind of disorganized, and it's going to be disorganized because I haven't had a chance to really flesh out and reconnect to what I was working on with episode 31 and 32. So I'm just kind of going to end it here because the planes keep going by. It's like making my thoughts very inconsistent. Per usual, let's do the card pull and what I'm grateful for. We're actually going to use 2 cards from 2 different decks since I haven't done this in so long. So the first one is going to be the Animal Spirit by Kim Kranz, and then the next one is going to be the Moonology deck. While I was preparing, I pulled out a card. I got the Camel card. So this one I actually never got before, not individually, and I don't think I've ever pulled it for the podcast either. Camel, resourceful, independent, knows oneself. The camel can handle absolutely anything, as it carries a wealth of nourishment within. This wondrous creature is self-reliant and handles challenges with ease. Even in the face of excess heat, judgment, or anger, the camel searches inside for the cool elixir of water to calm the situation. The camel represents the ultimate form of bringing opposites into balance, fire and water, and being responsible for one's own reactions. The camel is a wonderful traveler and is especially fond of trips to faraway lands. When in balance, calm, content, sparkle in the eye. When out of balance, dehydrated, lacks vitality. To bring into balance, a pilgrimage. For the Moonology deck, the card I pulled was the Gibbous Moon, which says you're very close to achieving your goal. The word gibbous means bulging. What a descriptive word, right? And pulling this card at any time of the month suggests the situation you're asking about is bulging with possibility and coming to a peak. But this isn't an ending card with a neat yes or no. Rather, you're being reminded that some adjustments may yet be required before you get what you want, though you're certainly on the right track, which is hopefully reassuring for you. However, there is also a sense that the situation is a bit tense, so don't push too hard. One false move and the whole thing could blow. That's not meant to scare you. It's just to let you know there's a fuse attached to the situation, so be careful if you choose to light it. Attune to the moon. I know that I'm on the right track. Additional meanings for this card. Now is a good time to review your plans. Keep the momentum going as you move towards your dreams. Stay focused. It's a good time to start a new project. You need to get back into good, healthy habits. The teaching. The gibbous moon comes at the very end of the lunar cycle, just before the full moon. She looks like she's bulging because she's almost a full moon, so she's nearly fully rounded. It's the accumulation of the waxing cycle, and as such, tends to be a rather intense period of the month. No matter when you pull this card, it suggests a very ripe time and a very ripe situation. So, with both of these cards, I think they're very fitting to what I was trying to say, because with the camel, what I want this episode to highlight, to be the key takeaway in a sense, is that personal development may be different when you're focused on yourself, aka looking inward, or when you're being outward and focus more on things outside of yourself. It's necessary to have both of those phases, and you shouldn't feel selfish when you are in the inward phase, but when you are also in the outward phase, you also should appreciate that you're not completely focused on yourself. You should recognize that even if it feels heavy, if it makes you feel frustrated, you can use that for your development once you're in the inward phase again. And each cycle, whether you're inward or outward, is meant to teach you something. And you can grow from both. You may need different toolkits of how to cope when you're in the different stages. And I just want this episode to remind you of all that, to bring yourself into balance with the fire and the water from the camel. And in terms of the Moonology card, this is your reminder when you're in these cycles. You're closer to your dreams than you think. You're closer to finding your way, and to be hopeful, stay focused. If you're on a phase where you're looking inward and you don't see the changes, or if you're in a phase outward and it feels like nothing's happening because you're too busy, because sometimes in both phases you can feel that, like you can feel the exact same thing but for different reasons. However, I say this wholeheartedly that I believe as long as you keep trying, as long as you're recognizing things in not a black or white way, that you can see the good with the bad, you can see that from both sides, that you will be further along than you think. I do think life can change at a blink of an eye too. On to what I'm grateful for. And this one I'm actually excited to talk about, because with my time being of service, one thing I was reminded of is how kind people can actually be. There were just many moments of kindness. So I'm going to give two examples. So the first time was when my mom had an appointment, and obviously I went with her. The taxi wouldn't show up, even though the appointment wasn't far, but when you have a parent that has like a walker or is not able to walk distances the same, it was just better to have a taxi. But we couldn't get one. Like, we called a bunch of times. One that was supposed to come literally just drove past us, and we called them back and was like, yeah, the taxi that was supposed to pick us up, they just kept driving, and we came out and was there, and they wouldn't stop driving. So then we ended up having to take the bus a few stops. At the bus stop, there was someone there that helped me help her onto the bus, because honestly, maneuvering a parent that, and then we never been on a bus at that point. Someone helped me get her on the bus, and the bus driver, for when we were getting off, pulled a lot closer to the curb. Like, originally it wasn't that close, but then I got off, and then he drove closer to the curb, and then the person that helped us on the bus helped her off the bus, and then throughout the way I just helped her the rest of the way home. So that's just one example. And then another example was when I ordered from Walmart. And also, this is something I wanted to complain about, because I have to do orders from Walmart because I don't drive, and it's pretty far away. So let me just state that. I was doing a Walmart order, and you know how people are supposed to bring things to the door? They got confused about where to come from, and I was trying to tell them, like, no, you can't go through that way. You have to, like, come in another way, because you have to go through security, essentially. So they ended up still parking on the outside, I presume, but because they said, oh, someone let them in. Then I was like, where are you? Like, and then they wouldn't come where they were supposed to come properly, so I had to come another way. And essentially, it wasn't like by my actual door. It was like a building, another way to be in the building, but not necessarily my door. So then they started taking out the groceries because they had a cart, right? And instead of coming up and actually bringing it to where they were supposed to bring it, which is the door, they kind of left me with all the stuff, and I couldn't carry it. Like, because it was like 2 watermelons and like different things, and I couldn't hold it myself. And the thing is, since my mom is still recovering, it's not like she could help me in that situation, even though I still called her because she's like my go-to when I have a problem. Then someone I think they were either about to I forgot if they were heading in or heading out, because there was like 2 or 3 people, and I was like by the door now. And then the guy helped me bring the stuff to what is actually my apartment, because it was too heavy for me to do on my own. And he was really nice. I thanked him. But it was just like the reminder that good people exist, kind people exist. And I kind of wanted to share those 2 like examples, because I know that it's so easy to forget. And a lot of times when we want to go inward or have a time when we're a little more selfish, it's because that we are exhausted, that contributing to the world, it feels like it's draining us. People are draining us. And that's why we need that time. But I also think brings a lot of hope in the world and makes us want to be kind too. I know it seems like a little bit kind of off topic, but it is something I am grateful for remembering kind people do exist. And it makes me more motivated to have an outwards era, because I do think that when you do good and you want to do good, not just to be seen as a good person, but because you are one, positive changes will happen. So that is all for today. I'm so sorry for the rambling. This is kind of what happens when I don't kind of plan ahead and ramble with thoughts. And I know it could get super repetitive, and I'm so sorry for that. But I still hope you enjoyed this episode. I am kind of in a comeback and kind of planning different things. So if you have things you want talked about, it would probably be best to let me know, whether if you're in a YouTube comment section or if you're reading this from a blog post, commenting different things that you wish that was talked about more in personal development and growth and wellness type vibes. Because I do want, when I create content, it not just be so centered around like myself, but just personal development in general, even though I know there's no real way to detach your own experiences, but trying my best to have a wider view. So if you are on YouTube, you know the drill, like, comment, subscribe. It would mean the world to me. And if you're on other platforms and you enjoy this type of content, give it a follow, give it a rate, you know. But anyways, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.